Saw the lights hit me, so I figured that means I should start talking. Cool. Well, thanks for joining us today. I'm Neil McCormick. I'm the Product Development Manager for Bios and Adjuvants at FBN, so I manage those two lines of business here, along with Dean Skinner, who's our in-house agronomist. I got Pat Duncanson, Pat farms in Minnesota, right? Yep. And then Spencer Stensrude farms in, what's that? Joyce, Iowa. Lyndon Smith is a veteran in the biostimulant industry. He's the vice president of the Humic Product Trade Association, as well as being involved in board member of the Fertilizer Institute. So a lot of just an industry point of view for the discussion. Then Ben Pederson farms in Iowa, is that? Okay, sorry, I should have done more background on my panelists before I got here, but that's all right. I could have gone down and read all the name tags. What we'll do to begin with is I'll just do a quick preface. What are biologicals, some basic agronomy 101, and then we'll get into the discussion after that. Keep going to the next slide here. We're just going to talk, if you look at fertilizer, the inputs we use, we have fertilizer, chemical on the right and the left. So what's the basic agronomic function we're trying to solve for with fertilizer, nutrient supply, chemical, biotic stress, and then, there's a lot of confusion. It's like, well, there's 5,000 products. They all gain you 10 bushels, 5 bushels. So by the time I add on all 500 products, I'm going to have a 10,000 bushel corn crop, be a billionaire. So that's not really the case. The benefits aren't just going to stack on top of it, on top of each other the more products you add. So there's really two things. If you look at all the materials out there, the biology can accomplish. One is nutrient availability. So once I have added that nutrient supply, how do I maximize the effectiveness? How do I protect the fertilizer investment, protect the soil investment? Then also biotic stress. So with chemistry, I'm trying to control for the living stresses. So all my, don't outcompete the weeds, fungus, that's a good new tagline, insecticides, and then, so that'd be all your living stresses. I need a chemical. Then with the biology, I can control for weather, soil. Then when I actually apply a lot of chemistry, it can knock the yield back. So those are the two basic things that biology can really accomplish and do that's out there to just cut through a lot of the noise in some basic agronomy. The next slide. So, kind of in spirit with all the yield gain stuff, it's really more we start the year with our yield potential, and really we're just trying to fight to maintain as much as we can. So it's really putting all the tools in place to be able to address all the potential limiting factors, not knowing what the weather is going to be or what the conditions are going to be. It's really about just proactively positioning the crop for success and trying to maintain as much of that yield potential as we can versus trying to think of it as, hey, I got to add this, get 5, 10, 15 bushels, et cetera. So that's just some general, what these products can actually do for us. And then if we go to the next slide, this is just showing a lot of the minimums. So again, the limiting factor. If you look at a crop, those are all the minerals they need. And we think of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium as the main components, but really it's the carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen that are, what the plant actually needs and what the structure is. So how do we control for and be able to capture more of those nutrients, which the hydrogen and oxygen, that's your water storage with the biology, and how do we can use the biology to control for those factors. Again, next slide. And then looking at this is showing a overview from Sparks. It's a soil textbook. So when you think of the fertilizer, a lot of times the thought is, well, we're mining all the fertilizer, we got to add more. But really in most soils, there's plenty of fertilizer for generations worth of farming. It's just more of a how do we access that fertilizer or keep it available at a fast enough rate that it's keeping up with the crop. So it's, adds another component where instead of just saying, well, I got to add and be able to supplement the fertilizer, it's really using the biology to figure out, well, how do I tap into that natural store in the soil or the fertilizer I've added that's gone unavailable. So that's another reason we want to focus and look at the biology. And then if you go to the next slide, this is just showing a graph of the generations worth of supply. So it's, it's typically a lot of fertilizers in the soil, it's just tapping into it. Next slide here. And then if we look at this is just showing the organic matter within the soil. So you have the living organisms, the fresh residue, the decomposing, and then the stable organic matter. And really our biology we can use to try to influence or supplement or replace or be able to really try to mitigate what's lost with the traditional cropping system when we add high salt or tillage. It's really how do we build this back up and try to prevent a lot of the loss of our natural soils. Next slide here. So I'm going to turn it over to Dean quick on a quick run through on the agronomy and what how this can function, how the nutrient deficiency works, and then we'll get into the questions here. So take it away, Dean.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. So slide. So a hot topic these days is stabilizing nitrogen and how we can use the biology to stabilize nitrogen. So when we think about ammonia in the soil, it's usually, well, with the fixation, we use microbes, we can fix more nitrogen. So different things like our inhabitant and things like that can fix nitrogen out of the atmosphere and then convert it by the biology into amino acids. And then nitrosomus will convert ammonia to nitrite, and nitrobacter will convert that into nitrate. And as nitrate, we risk losing the nitrogen because it's very soluble in the water and can leach out of our soil. Or if we have a flooding condition, a lot of the microbes have adapted, or some of the microbes have adapted, they can pull the oxygen off of that molecule, which leaves the nitrogen free to go back into the atmosphere. We lose it from the cropping system. So how can biology help to kind of hold this nitrogen and prevent us from losing it? Next slide. What happens is we get the sunlight shining on the leaf, and that's going to create photosynthesis, which ties up carbon and hydrogen and oxygen from the water and carbon dioxide and converts it to sugars. And those sugars then can be, on the next slide, feed the bacteria. And the bacteria will start to go out with, if it has lots of carbon, it's going to go out into the environment and tie up all these other nutrients it needs to kind of reproduce itself. But when it needs a lot more carbon than it does the nitrogen that it's getting, so it's going to basically leave lots of available nitrogen to the plant. And when the protozoa consumes that, it's basically going to excrete, like a cow, essentially a lot of this amino acids out of the back end. So they have the energy on, they have the nitrogen on, they have a lot of these different nutrients with it. So it's a more complete way of getting nutrients into the plant. And essentially when it's in the biology, it's tied up so it can't leach away. So this is one of the ways we can prevent these normal nitrogen losses. Slide. And another way that we can tie up the nutrients and slow that nitrogen cycle down is through the humates. Humates are able to bind the nitrogen and basically hold on to it, so it's safer for the biology. It won't burn the biology as much, and as well kind of protect it from leaching, and then we see the nutrients being absorbed better into the plant. And basically, because those microbes are scavenging, we can hold on to, and they'll go get a lot of these other nutrients you see there out of the soil profile. So those would be nutrients as well that were considered not available to the plant. Once we get them into the biology, we can store it there in the plants.
Cool, yeah. Thanks, Dean. Yeah, so, and as far as what materials are out there and what, so that's all soils function that way. So that's nothing, it's really about influencing that whole process to be able to either, can I use less fertilizer? Can I get better water holding capacity, long-term soil health? Hopefully translate into yield, but that's the general overall process with all biologicals that we're trying to influence as the goal of that. And then these are the materials that represent the market share with, it's sold today. So a lot of seaweed, amino acids, organic acids, which would be the humate type products, and then your live microbes. So that's just a snapshot of what's out there today to give you a sense of, instead of viewing it as, hey, there's 5,000 products, they all do different things, you got to navigate through them. It's more like, here's what biology actually does, here's the materials that are out there today that can accomplish those things, and then, what's the differences or the combinations or the quality components that are going to, lead to, or practices that are going to lead to better chances at success. If you go to the next slide here, this is just a summary again, showing the, if we add biology, reduce or maintain fertilizer, then we want to, use biology to build organic matter, increase nutrient availability, water holding capacity, stress mitigation, increase the photosynthetic output of the plant to feed more carbon down in the soil, promote more above ground growth and yield. And then ultimately, if you do all those things, the objective is long-term ROI. So it's, and then if we look at the landscape today, there's a lot of different companies out there, again, to navigate through and figure out who does what's the best product. It's hard to try everything on your guys' farm, so what we, if you go to the next slide here, we've got the Innovators Research League, and the goal with that, if you guys were at the last presentation, is really to use that as the funnel for all these technologies and get real-world data to be able to validate, okay, what's the claim, how do we measure it, how do we make sure it's doing what we think it's going to do before we bring it to market. So something FBN's doing to try to be able to sift through all this, and then again, just be able to validate and commercialize through that program. And then next slide here. So just again, lack of data, market access, and then just having the unbiased data so that you guys can, as we expand this is the first year, so we're going to have some products come to market likely in the near future out of the program, but just, our goal is really as we vet through these products and do all the testing that, that we've done all the work to, make sure that they're good products before they come to market. So just want to do a quick overview on that to give you some background before we tee up the conversation, and then we can get into the questions here. You're probably tired of me talking, and these guys are probably tired of sitting there looking at me, so we're going to get into the questions from here. So you can go through the slide. I think that's the last one. So let's go with Lyndon, as from your point of view, as being in the industry a long time, how have you seen the evolution from 30, 40 years ago? What has it been like for you, having been in bios before bios were cool, and involved in the space, and then what gets you excited about the future, and where do you think we're at in that timeline?
Yeah, thanks. It's a pleasure to be with you. It's been interesting to watch the evolution that's happening within the industry, particularly with respect to biostimulants. When I began in the industry, it was laughed at and thought of as, okay, snake oil, whatever you want to call it. But the ideal is that by applying a very little amount of certain components or certain constituents, certain ingredients, you can make a lot of difference in yield enhancement, in nutrient availability, in quality of the crop, in soil health, and everything that goes along with that. Water holding capacity, water use efficiency. Anyway, that was the mantra that we grew up with. The catch is everyone who was in that biostimulant industry traditionally, what we did to get by the regulators was to go in and register our products as nutrients. And so we'd say, okay, it's got an NPK or maybe some micronutrients or secondary macros, and that's how we would register the products, even though at the back end we'd say, oh, and by the way, this also does this, or this can really enhance yield, or this can really enhance quality, or this can cause the plant to grow, or this can cause more root development, or this can replace this or that. Anyway, we couldn't make the claims as a biostimulant. Still can't today. So I wish I could tell you that I understand biostimulants, but there's no such thing yet. So it's a discussion in the regulatory reform. So what's happened is Europe took the lead in 2018, passed a biostimulant movement in Europe. It went into final effect this last summer, 2022. And then before that, and then the US started to catch on board in 2016. The EPA started to take a look at it. They issued draft guidance that was given for the biostimulants and how the claims of biostimulants could be made. And that's still going through revision. USDA got involved in the 2018 Farm Bill with definition of biostimulants in the United States. It at least got as far as a report to Congress from the industry, and so we participated heavily in that. And then today, we're waiting now the 2023 Farm Bill. There's been a biostimulant bill that's been introduced into the last Congress. In the lame duck, it kind of fell apart, but it'll be reintroduced again in January. So there's a lot of things happening in the whole biostimulant movement within the United States so that we can make the claims that we've been saying off to the side for years and be able to call them true biostimulants. And a biostimulant basically is something that stimulates the plant to enhance its nutrient uptake, enhance its metabolic pathways in a way that is independent of the amount of product or the amount of nutrient that might be applied with it.
Yeah, awesome. And a segue into that for one of the farmers in the crowd, or in the panel here, you know, we talk about the labeling and how everything looks like a fertilizer. It's hard to tell what's in a product. You know, it's not really the intent of any of the, I don't think the people making the products, but it's really caused confusion at the farmer level where you guys are stuck. Well, if you're not getting a good explanation when you get to the farm, then how do you know what's in a product if there's not a website, if you don't see any technical material? And do you guys deal with that a lot, and how does that affect your view of these products?
Yeah, I mean, there's been bugs and jugs peddled to us for, I mean, as long as I've been at it, for sure. And it seems like the last 3 years, the term biological, I mean, it's a buzzword, right? I mean, we got to narrow that down a little bit. Everybody in here is biological. Your bodily functions are biological. So what does that kind of point to some of this stuff being, right? That doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater, though. I mean, just this past year we tried, so little side note, my sister business is a precision planting dealership, and so we're well familiar with putting liquid on planter. In fact, we already had a liquid system on our planter, and it just, evidence cropped up where I knew we needed to be trying something else, and we were using a nitrogen product on our planter, and I just thought, I just kind of hated every minute of knowing I had to add a second liquid system to the planter and complicate things further. Good news is we used a plant growth regulator and a humic acid product in furrow, and I haven't fully analyzed the data yet, but it looks to be like it was 8 to 10 bushel. So we were well rewarded for that, and it's something we definitely want to learn more about.
Cool. Yeah, anybody else, any other thoughts on the just labels and navigating products? Go ahead, Spencer. Looks like you got a...
Yeah, so I sit in kind of an interesting spot in the ag industry where I'm a little league farmer, actually farm really close to Ben, up in north central Iowa. But then my day job is actually investing in startups in agriculture. I lead a co-op of farmers that invest in ag innovation. And so I get to see it kind of from the startup side of things too, where they're trying to go to market and navigate the rules around what you can claim and what you can't. And I have about this much sympathy for government, and so if they have not made the criteria clear in dozens of years, it's probably time to get out of the way, or do something or get out of the way.
Yep. Yeah, because and really you're down to like you have to haggle with individual state regulators to be able to make claims on products. There's not really a clean science to it. It's that simple, honestly. Yes. Next question for Pat there. Pat, if you had to envision your farm in 5 to 10 years with a more complete and successful biological integration, how would you picture that in your head, or how would you want that to look? Like if you had what's a 100% success? You think you've reached the mecca of biological adoption. What would that look like?
Well, compared to the starting point where we are today, I would like to have one product that I could hang my hat on to say I'm going to use this every year, and I'm probably going to get a return most years.
Yeah.
that would be the mecca for me.
Yeah.
We've tried a lot of products, and we keep looking for the right combination. When I think of the biological space, about trying to put a relatively small amount of product out there to inoculate or infect our cropping environment, there are so many variables involved that I think it's farm specific, I think it's weather specific, very crop specific, and then we look at all the different ways that we can apply the product, whether we apply it in furrow like Ben was talking about, whether we apply it foliar, whether we apply it at side dress time, how we do it. There are so many variables, and there are so many products that legitimately probably have potential.
Yep.
So I would like to figure out on our farm a product that I could consistently and confidently use and get a return on.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other, Ben or Spencer, any thoughts on the biomecca for you guys? What does that look like?
So I think we're kind of like there's been a couple bio companies that have gotten tons of traction over the last couple years, and I think that we can just kind of see the path or the trend where I think the mecca is we totally totally replace all of the synthetic fertilizer and chemistry that we use today, and we've got a long ways to go. But if we're talking about the big vision, I think that's what it is, and you got to be kind of open-minded to think it's possible, and maybe it will be, maybe it won't be, but there's probably more hope for that than there ever has been.
Yeah.
If I could just tee up on what Pat said there for a second. So, of course, my other sister business is farming, and as my dad steps back, I'm kind of rebranding our farm, called it Vital Grains, and it's kind of it's a nod to regenerative farming, of course, where we strip till, cover crops, we're reducing fertilizer rates through banding and so forth. So I'm just kind of a soil geek, or an aspiring soil geek. I don't feel like I know enough yet, and there's nothing more I like seeing than digging up a handful of soil and seeing a bunch of earthworms and so forth. And one of my favorite facts is there's more organisms in that handful of soil than there are people on Earth. And most of them we don't know who they are, what they're doing there. So Pat talks about all sorts of variables. There's 8 million variables in there too. So we add a few bugs here and there that may or may not survive being suspended in fertilizer. We got to make sure we're really doing something. So yeah, the mecca would be, and I like the innovators of the IRL, Innovators Research League, easy for me to say, might help separate some of the wheat from the chaff, rather than all of us having to do it ourselves and spend costly time and money. Just knowing what's going to give us a response, that would be my goal.
Yeah, nice. And I think that's a good segue to the agronomist, Dean. Like, Dean, from an agronomy point of view, do you think, like, what's possible, just in your opinion, with the biology, if you had to say, just what is the potential agronomically from your point of view?
Well, we've been looking at the science for quite a while, and there are, I would say, a lot of innovators out there, and some universities in Australia that are growing cereal crops 100% biologically and getting actually better yields than when they use the fertilizer controls. So the potential is very high. It's just, it's very complicated agronomy, as these guys had mentioned. There's a lot of different variables, and trying to find a path that we can choose products and not have a big wreck,
Yeah.
I think is one of our largest challenges. Because as you know, as FBN, we're not an agronomy company per se. So trying to find, test these products out, stress test them in a lot of different soil environments, and try to, find, whether it's like we talk about a 2-year, 3-year path to start building up enough biology in the soil that we can start to get more of the crop needs from those biological organisms. And just trying to consistently be able to do that through, the large variation in growers and crops that FBN has is, I guess that's our challenge. So we work on that a lot. I think that definitely, as they mentioned, all these different organisms out there, nature has built the soil and been able to provide those nutrients to the crop, but we have still a long ways to go to kind of find a consistent mecca where we can have a few ingredients to pull that off. So.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, you could do 100% right, and if you're short on molybdenum, you could have it, like, that's the complexity of it, is it could be that sensitive where you have one little micronutrient you don't even know you're short on, and to test the whole field to figure that out, it's just a complex, it's a very complex equation to try to solve. So I think it's always, like, a good analogy I always have myself is, it's easy to measure chemicals because, death is finite. If something's, like, the weed's dead, I know it, but if you ask, well, how do you define quality of life, there's 1,000 different definitions of that, so it's trying to figure out how to measure the soil, like what is soil health, how to measure that is a very complex equation. And then Lyndon, I think, had another comment on top of that, so I'll hand it over.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. One of the things that is coming is industry is right now putting together a labeling program for biostimulants so that whenever it does become a regulatory reform that we're looking for in the United States, then there'll be a labeling program that already talks about the consistency, the composition of the product, the safety of the product, and the efficacy of the product. And if we can do that as an industry, meaning anybody who's in the biologicals, in the humic and fulvic space, or in the seaweed, or in the amino acid space, if we can do that for every one of those types of products, then we're going to be able to come to growers and say, look, here's the claim, and here's how it's been proved, and here's how you can have confidence in it, so that when you get the product, you can be able to know exactly what it is, rather than maybe just an NPK on the label. You'll know everything else that's in there.
Yeah, and I think that provide a lot of clarity, so that it's kind of like you just bought think if you just bought a chemical and it said no label, just had a chemical, and it just said chemical on the label, then you just had to spray it out there and hope that it killed the weeds you wanted to kill. It'd be pretty risky to try to, so I think we're at that state. And if you could say, well, my issue with my soil is, well, I have a pH imbalance, so if I can add something that balances a pH at this rate or solves organic matter, I think that's what Lyndon's alluding. We'll be able to make more of those specific claims so you can address specific issues. Yeah, Ben, do you have an additional thought on top of that, or on to the next?
Nope, I think we're ready to move on.
Okay, and then, if as far as adopting, what's the information, when you guys get, when you're pitched a product, when you're investing in it, Spencer, Pat, and Ben, as you're getting on the farm, what are the effective, what do you guys like to see, or what are the things that are, resonate with you and get you okay, well, I think that's viable, I'm going to try it. So what's if 100 guys are, 100 people are pitching you something, what's the 5 that are making it onto the farm to give a go?
I'll start with that. So if I can somehow get a trusted advisor to tell me that a product has at least a smidgen of a chance to actually work, it's okay, maybe I'll give it a shot and I'll take a look. But that would get the product in the door to get, I'm going to say, what I would call a research level, not even really a scale of concept. But much like the IRL, investing in properly done on-farm research, I believe in this space is incredibly important, because I really do believe that some of these things are farm-specific and site-specific, and if the organic matter in your farm is different or something else, and the value of good on-farm testing and on-farm research is really important, and whether if the product works or if it doesn't, because if you just do a simple side-by-side or say, well, I'm going to treat this field and not treat the other field and use that as my control, statistically, that's probably not any better than the flip of the coin. You need to have replications. They need to be controlled, in my opinion, and so they need to be like strips. It doesn't have to be complicated, but 3 or 4 strips where you turn it on or you turn it off, and you record those strips and then follow them through the season if you want to, but certainly at harvest time, measuring that yield difference.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. But back to your question, a trusted advisor I have to rely on someone to help me sort these products because there are so many of them.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm going to take this one definitely with the farmer hat on. So I would like to, I'd like to see some kind of data that gives me at least a little bit of confidence that it's not going to be a negative effect. But otherwise, I'm pretty open to trying to test almost all that I can. I would say the IRL, the concept of the IRL, really good. I like to test things on kind of a small scale, and then my whole farm is a small scale, but small scale for my small scale farm. before kind of expanding that out. And I think that's a really good approach overall. I will say I have a little bit of a weakness for if somebody has a really good logical explanation for a product, or if they can tell you when it works and when it doesn't, then I also have a little bit more confidence in that. But like to say I'd stay pretty data driven and adopt on a small scale before going larger scale.
Yeah, Spencer hit one of the things I was going to say is it's got to make sense. You know, as a kind of an aspiring soil nerd, as I said, there's got to be some mechanics to what's going on. I can't just be pie in the sky, hopes and dreams, unicorn tears, put it in there and it's good. You'll get your 8 to 10 bushel, pay me now. So for instance, the products we used, the humic acid, the plant growth regulator, it was another business that tried these products out. They were a third party to these products, saw great results, so that obviously piqued my curiosity. And then in addition, it wasn't even a salesperson that told me this about humic acids, and maybe Linda could comment and see if this is perhaps true. Humic acids, in the opinion of this person I talked to, create more attachment points. So if you're familiar with cation exchange capacity, where the points in soil where ions hang on to and are available for plants instead of flushing out of the soil, it's falsely or somehow, I'm not going to pretend I know how, but it's creating more of those attachment points right where we need them. But whatever the case was, it worked. So in addition to, yes, evidence that stuff actually works, it's been on other farms, perhaps ours, there's got to be some mechanics and reasons it works.
So with microbials, there's certain exudates that come out of the microbials that make them biostimulants. With the humic and fulvic space, as Ben was just commenting on, what happens there is you're actually stimulating the plant biologically. You're dinging it just a little bit, and the plant responds to that stress by bulking up. It's like us going to the gym. We bulk up when we go to the gym by breaking down some muscle tissue. I know I'm not the epitome of that, but that's how it works. And so a humic or a fulvic acid will ding the plant, the crop, just a little bit, very little. You won't see it if it's a good humic or a fulvic. If it's not so good, it may burn the crop. So you have to be careful about the dosage that you put on. But anyway, the point being that it'll ding the crop a little bit. The plant will bulk up and then be prepared for that next abiotic stress that might come its way. And some of the biologicals will do the same thing, overcoming certain abiotic stresses or certain challenges in the environment or whatever. So yeah, exactly what you're talking about. And humics and fulvics work on functional groups that are on the carbon ring. So if you're familiar with the benzene ring, then it's all about the different types of functional groups that are located on that. That would be like carboxyls, amines, all the series of functional groups that are out there in the environment. So that's what differs between a humic and a biochar, for example, is a biochar doesn't have any of those live capabilities on there. It's not bioactive. It's just pure carbon. So as an idea.
Yeah. I think segueing into that, there's been a lot of research in the last 20, 30 years. You look 40, 50 years ago, the amount of research in the biospace was more limited. So then when you threw products out, like, well, what's this doing? Well, I don't think there was less genuine knowledge about it. But if you look at what's out there now, there's reams and reams of research about what these materials do, how they work, what specific species do. So, from a farmer point of view, how much education do you think is needed to really, do you think lack of education, or do you think there's more education on the space in general needed just to make farmers more aware of how do soils work, what are the functions, what are the potential limiting factors, to kind of get out of the, well, throw it on, see if I see something above ground or see if the yield monitor, because that's the way a lot of us, I think, measure success. But if we know the function of the biologicals and building soil and how we can influence that, I mean, do you guys to me it seems like there's a big gap there, but curious your guys' thought on, how much education plays a role and if there's more needed.
Oh, it's huge. Again, my sister business selling planter systems largely. Some of these systems, you're talking 24 planters, you can easily hang 6 figures on a planter. Well, you're not going to do that just for fun, to dress things up and look cool. Some people might, and I'm all right with that, but you're going to want a return on investment. So it's the same way here, I think. So I guess I would encourage everybody, and I think it's an important thing. I don't know who's going to step up and provide that in a maybe easy to chew and swallow manner rather than having to hammer agronomy textbooks. I think it would make us all a little bit more discerning in what might be BS and what might be a good ROI opportunity.
I'll take the other side of that one. I think there's probably some alpha for a farmer. You can probably make a little bit more money a little earlier, a little faster if you maybe do try to build up that education a little bit. But there's also the simpler way of just weighing it all at the end of the season and like the on-farm research, add up the dollars and see if that works, and that'll probably serve you pretty well too.
I'm not even sure what the question is anymore, but I've got a thought that I'll share.
Yeah, just speak your mind. It's all good.
Well, until you hear what I say. One idea is, we may go out and in these trials that I've talked about and others have talked about, we may go out and try it and not be able to measure that yield response. And we might have actually gotten a tremendous response from a product application. And it might have really made the plant a lot more robust to withstand some stresses that we didn't happen to have that year. And we might have had a tremendous response that we aren't able to measure with the yield monitor. So as much as I want to put the narrow blinders on and say, it's all about yield, you got to pay the bills. Sometimes some of these products might actually do what they say. It's just we didn't have the year to trigger that.
Yep. Yeah.
So that, I don't know if that means multiple years of testing or more field observations.
Yeah, so I think a good example is if you're year one, you got good rain, you're putting a product down that's helping with your water holding capacity. You give up, I didn't see any yield, but if you applied that for 4 or 5 years, build up that capacity, the pore space, maybe year 5 is the year that all of a sudden you got a 30 bushel difference. It's way more drought tolerant, but it's hard to do trials for that 5-year period to really get that measurement. And it's like, well, do you want to spend 5 years? But it could make that ROI could come on later. And I know humates have a general reputation of that. So Lyndon, curious here, having dealt with those materials, if that's an effect that you've observed.
A great example of that is you might see with a humic type product, or even a biological or a seaweed, you might see enhanced root growth, and you might see a bigger stalk, and you might see a longer ear, but it didn't turn out in the bin. It didn't turn out in the yield. And you have to ask yourself, okay, well, what happened? Well, you have the potential there for an increased yield, right? And so you have to look at it and say, okay, we must have ran out of energy somewhere along the way. Liebig's barrel must have had a leak in it somewhere, meaning one of the nutrients might have been deficient, or something else might have been going on because we built the structure to give us the yield, but we didn't quite get there in the bin. And so we have to look at that again the next year and say, okay, well, now that I saw the enhancement in the root development, in the plant growth, in the size of the fruit or whatever, but I didn't get the number in the yield, what do I have to do to get that next step? And then that raises some other opportunities for, other biostimulants to maybe come in and help do that. And so that's our answer for that.
Yeah, and Dean, from an agronomy point of view, what are the things you think limit the potential of bioperformance, just agronomically? If you had to, that's a complicated question we could talk for 3 hours on, but we can, and we do often, but.
Yeah, that is very complicated. And there's a lot of different factors. I know we look at our farming practices, and I think, even tillage, fungicides, we think about the biology as a whole. When we add a fungicide, do we know what all funguses that's killing? Because there's many beneficial ones as well as pathogenic ones. And by having that happen, we oftentimes see different impacts with, if we're trying to grow fungus in the soil to improve soil quality. You know, that's one thing that can come up. Some of the different fertilizers sometimes could burn the biology, so just understanding how we can mitigate a lot of these practices that we do, and we can continue to do them, but find ways to help make them safer to the biology.
Yep.
And continue to feed the biology, because it really is living things.
Yep.
And they're very sensitive to a lot of the different types of operations that we do, so it's.
Yeah, so you got to really look at the holistic, what's, you know, if I want to build biology, I can't just look at it as a one-off product. It's got to be an overall system, and, you know, it involves, you know, the tillage. Everybody knows that factor. Is there harsher or less harsh chemicals I can use to mitigate the damage I might be doing in the soil? So there's a lot of, yeah, it's a giant puzzle to figure out. So I think it's a good point. It's not as sometimes as easy as just, you know, throw something down and solve all your problems at once. It's got to be more systematic in nature. So yeah, I think I'll do a couple more questions, and we can go to Q&A. But just curious from the farmers, you know, where do you guys want to see the space? You know, we talked about the mech on your farm, but the space at large, you know, what would you like it to look like? Or, you know, in a perfect world, what does the buying experience look like? Like, how do you want to, you know, just from, if we had this all figured out in 5 years, where would you like to see, you know, the IRL, the FBN, maybe other players? Like, where would you guys want this to go to be like, man, it's fun adopting biologicals, I understand it, you know, and just get more confident. So.
Wow.
That was a big question, sorry.
That was a big question.
Just kind of rattled that one off, hoping it landed somewhere, so.
Okay. So if, you know, I see the potential in the IRL or the good research, I'm going to say on-farm research, and not that I'm discounting university research, but in this space, it doesn't seem like there's anything happening there. It seems like it's going to be industry or on-farm is where it's probably going to come from.
Yep.
And I'm not exactly sure, nor do I, you know, want to get into why that is. I don't really know, but it would really be cool if in 5 years we could have a chart that would say, okay, if you have 5% organic matter in this field, and you have this condition, and if you're in a manure-based system versus in a hydrous ammonia-based system, and you're in such and such a latitude from a temperature standpoint and a availability, that this product or this ratio of humic acid and something else, these are the ingredients you need to increase your chances of success and response. That would, to me, be really cool if we could ever get to that point.
Yeah, more of a prescriptive, like, hey, if your conditions are this, if your pH is this product probably isn't the right product, but if you use this one, you got to solve the pH issue or the CEC issue before, you know, don't waste your money on A before you solve B kind of thing. Yep. So it's less throwing darts at the wall and more strategic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or if you have one of those issues and you put this product on, it might help you speed up the response to fixing that, you know, pH issue or something.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's I mean, that kind of thing is really exciting, and I think we are starting to see a little bit more of that, and there's some exciting stuff happening with, like, the cost of gene sequencing has crashed in the last couple decades, and now it's really cheap to get genetic testing for your soil, and so I think that's going to start teaching us a lot of things that we never even knew before. But I think like 5-year goal, if 5 years goes faster than we all think, probably, but I really like the idea of biologicals and biological farming kind of making farmers more resilient. If you don't have to put quite as many dollars out there at risk, then you're a lot more resilient to the ups and downs that happen with, you know, we've got a lot of uncontrollable variables. So I think just increasing farmer resilience through biological farming and biological products, I think, is a really, really solid 5-year goal.
Well, I think in 5 years, I think the next 5 years are going to be really exciting. I think there's definitely new frontiers to be explored. I talked about biologicals being a buzzword earlier. I'll throw another one out there. Electrophysiology. It's a term that's been used in medicine, but we've been playing with, and it does play into the biological space because we're stimulating biology with this technology. One company doing it, their name's Bright Yeti, they're here, enough said. But we've been playing with it, and what we're doing is affecting seeds right now at a molecular level with electromagnetics and just giving them an instruction manual to, hey, you need to get ready to do this now. In the case of current technology that we've been using, we're telling seeds, when you see moisture and you see some soil, you do your thing and you do it right away. And again, in dealing with planters, I know what a big deal in corn is, quick, even emergence is. So I think electrophysiology is probably the next frontier. And if it seems like snake oil, witchcraft, and voodoo, what were biologicals 50 years ago, right? So we're not done exploring how we can affect things positively, not by a long shot. So to think that the end of the story is dumping jugs in our sprayer or putting on a different sort of fertilizer or a fertilizer enhancer or whatever, and they're all good. I mean, not all good. There's a lot of good. There's a lot of good in them. There's a lot to be explored there, and I think the best is yet to come. But there's other modes of action I think that are coming that are going to be really exciting.
And then from the manufacturing side of the house, I just have to tell you, it is a really exciting time for you guys, because I've never seen industry come together like they have on these issues about biostimulants. We've always been competitors. And so to have industry come together and where we're all working together for a common cause has really motivated a lot of things to happen within the industry. So when you take a look at somebody like a Corteva or Syngenta or, you name it, anybody who's out there and they're working in the same biological space as a startup company next door, it's been fun to see how everybody's working together and trying to make things work for the grower. And so the exciting thing is you've got industry now jazzed about helping the grower to accomplish things that in the past have always been, looked at jaundicedly and said, well, we can't do that. What's demanding it? It's the consumer that's demanding it. It's the farm to table and all these other farm to market and all these other initiatives that are trying to demand something that's more sustainable, something that's regenerative, something that's, soil healthy, something that's, doing our environment a service rather than taking away. Anyway, these are all things that are exciting. And so the consumer's pulling it through the industry, and industry's responding. So in my mind, the next 5 years are going to be exciting to be a grower. If we can just get you a label that you can trust and have confidence in and know what really is going on with what's in the jug or in the sack, that's going to be the big thing for industry.
Yeah, thanks, Lyndon. Yeah, so I mean, sounds like the general trend we've observed is, more data, more understanding, better labeling, better registration, be able to know what these products are doing and why, and then be able to measure the effect more prescriptively. So, those are, and IRL came up quite a bit. If you guys aren't familiar, we went through it briefly, but that's our Innovators Research League where we are trying to funnel in and sort through all these products and just continually get better and better data. And also worth noting, we have our strip trial reports that are, you can do all this on your own farm, where if you run hey, I want to test different rates of fertilizer, or I really want to hone in how to use this product or see if there's a sweet spot where I'm getting an ROI. You can just run all those experiments, add different products, and then you can get a report back on your specific to your operation that'll just tell you the results after the season. And I know Matt Miser's in the back here. His team manages all that. If you have any questions on IRL, I think him and Luke are around to talk on that. And it's really a great, great way for us to just, again, be that gatekeeper and be able to facilitate. Our goal is to really facilitate a lot of the things we talked about today and help to, take it to the next level and genuinely adopt these products and just tap into what, seems like you've been in that space for a while where we're trying things, we're not really figuring it out. So, FBN feels really positioned to help you guys just figure out the whole equation and it'll take some time, but I think, yeah, the 5 to 10 year horizon is pretty, like you said, comes faster than you think. Any closing comments from you guys before we go to Q&A, or we can go right there?
We don't have much time left here because I think we're sitting between us and happy hour.
Oh, shoot. So, yeah.
Yeah.
If you guys want to bail, you're good. You can
Yeah.
just go out anytime.
But for those that are willing to bear with us, I'll just give a comment about
Yeah.
the power of marketing.
In that case, Pat, be brief, okay?
I'll try. I'll try.
Yeah, that's a loaded topic. So
Yeah, yeah. So, but the power of marketing, and there's a product that a lot of my friends in the Central Corn Belt were using this year, and it had the promise of saying, well, you can reduce your nitrogen rate by 20 pounds, 30 pounds an acre, and you can use this product, and it'll generate nitrogen. And that, wow, that just sounds fantastic. And it costs just a little bit of money compared to what 20 pounds of nitrogen cost. And I'm using approximate numbers, but. We had looked at that same product in a testing group where we did validated strip trials for several years, and our testing group in our neighborhood, and I was sharing data with neighbors, much like the IRL,
Yep.
we couldn't measure a single response. So in conversations with these farmers, they really wanted it to happen because they didn't want to put on that extra 20 pounds or whatever it is of nitrogen. They wanted to save that money. And get to the end of the year, and they said, yeah, I had the same yield where I cut the nitrogen rate by 20 pounds versus where I had my normal rate of nitrogen, and I put this product on. Well, did they leave a control where they didn't put the product in and reduce the nitrogen? No.
Yep.
So back to making sure you have good data, and the power of marketing. I like studying how companies market their products.
Yeah.
It's just a weird habit of mine. there is a lot of power, and they didn't say anything that wasn't true.
Yep.
So they didn't lie to us, but we have to make sure we ask good questions, and that isn't being disrespectful by any means at all.
Yep.
It just means doing your homework.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's anybody else comments or?
Sorry, I wasn't brief.
That's all good. Cool. Well, we'll go to Q&A here and see if does anybody have any questions for anybody on the panel or.
I'll ask a quick one. Do you have much research on, or what are your thoughts on biochar, or using loaded biochar in furrow or anything like that?
I don't think we had any biochar specific data, but Dean and Lyndon and Dean could probably answer that question for you. Whoever wants to, have at or Dean, then we'll let Lyndon.
Yeah. Well, I've done a lot of research on biochar, and definitely it does have nutrient storage capacity, but we don't have any real, FPN doesn't really have any data on using that and seeing those results. But
but agronomically it would have that benefit. It's the science would support that it would, but it's just it's the tough part I think is if you add product A, how much your product B can you reduce, and that's a tough thing to, like you're getting into at the night. It's a tough thing to guarantee on consistently on every acre. You just see a lot of, if you've been over applying a product and you reduce it, then you're less likely to see a response. But if you're short on something and then you reduce it, then you could have, so it's just a hard, I think that's probably the hardest part of the equation that we observe is how do you add product A and reduce product fertilizer B? It's just tough to.
yeah, I think with biochar too, there's a lot of factors that affect the quality of it. So it really probably depended on manufacturer and doing more full field scale type trials to really, but it definitely, I think in more weathered soils, it does help build back CEC and some of those things. So.
Well, Lyndon, any additional thoughts or?
Well, I'm bought and paid for by the humic industry, so biochar is a competitive product, and you're basically taking ashes of burnt materials, whether it's plant-based material or other types of materials, and you're applying that to your soils. And it is straight carbon, so you are increasing the carbon. One of the things that we've always said is it's not bioactive carbon. It's not an activated carbon that you would get like with a humic material, which is carbon that has these functional groups that do certain things in the environment. So.
Well, any other questions?
Yeah, my question is.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah. Yeah, my question is, like, are you doing actually any work in a controlled environment? Because I mean, my concern with doing anything with biology is like, well, what's your soil temperature? Like, you get above 90 Fahrenheit for a few days, your biology's starting to, you know, it stops or starts dying. And like, so if you do it in a controlled environment, you can actually see what the product does. And then versus a no-till farm with good litter on top, his soil temperature is cooler, versus like the guys in the Corn Belt here, I kind of don't see it working with heavy tillage because they're going to get so hot down here, and their soil temperature on a hot day might be 110 degrees Fahrenheit. You know, like.
Yep, no, that makes, yeah, so within the trials we do, and we have all that data stored, so we have soil temperature data, all the historical weather data, and then our trials are set up to be replicated strips, so we try to avoid side-by-sides and get, you know, a lot of them are 30, 40 strips throughout the field, and that's going to give you more statistical significance than you're eliminating, you know, the soil factors if you're doing that with the product. But then we agreed, though, if you're tilling and you have the soils warmed up and say the biology you're using doesn't react as well to that, that's something that we'd have to, I mean, it's complicated to get a firm answer. The reality is if all you guys went out and bought 50 different bio products and every farmer in the network tried them for a year, did replicated trials, we could answer all these questions within a year. But it's really, we're not going to do that, obviously. You're not going to go try all that, set up all those trials, but it's really to get to those answers. We're only limited by the volume of the data and the quality of the data to do that within our network. So I mean, we're doing it on a small scale in IRL, but the more you guys do that type of stuff, and we have all those data sets to be able to take all that stuff into account you're talking about, but it just takes a lot of it. So you know, that's where I could see in 5-10 years, if we start to get more and more of that adoption and data set, we can start to get more into that detail. But it is hard to tell, you know, is the soil, without enough data, well, is that the soil temperature that caused the response or the lack of a nutrient? Like it is fairly complex, but that's a good question though.
I like that point because, at least in our part of the world, the way of doing things with soil was basically telling it, do what I want you to do, damn it. You know, the beatings will continue until your health improves. And if we really want response, you know, we want biology to work with us, but we got to work with the soil. Enough said.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think it's like health, if you're unhealthy and you're taking whatever medications you're prescribed and then you continue to eat an unhealthy diet. Well, why isn't the medication working? But you're continuing to eat like donuts or. But I mean, that's kind of if you're working against what you're trying to accomplish, that's a big factor to, again, like Dean mentioned, it's the overall system of, well, if I'm antagonizing myself on one side and asking, well, why isn't the solution working? You know, you got to look at, well, what can I actually negate instead of add to be able to facilitate? But you guys are doing like advanced calculus to try, like chemicals easy, you put it on instead, but the biology is like advanced calculus compared to that, which is kind of fun. Any other questions? Yep.
How it's applied, say, to the seed, in furrow, straight over tops, or any, are you seeing any difference in the way the biologicals are applied?
Oh, how they're applied? Yeah, I guess, Dean, do you have any thoughts on just application and efficacy? Like if it's near the seed, it depends on the product, I would say, but you probably, let you take that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And typically, you know, we look at, you know, whoever are partners with data to see, you know, how good of a response they get through all these different methods of application. And it does require, short answer, a lot of data just to validate and prove which is the best application method. So.
Yep, I think maybe a good example like BT genetics, you can buy BT and put it on the seed as a seed treatment, but it works better within the genetics because you don't have to rely on the survivability of the microbe on the seed. So you're taking away, you get the consistency because you're taking away that potential limiting factor. So it is like the best is if you can inject it into the seed, that's going to be, but that's like GMOs and that's that whole space there, so that's a little more complicated. But like humates are more like if you're putting them on the soil, if you're trying to treat the soil or the plant, I think. So if you're going for soil health, then it's going to depend really on what benefits you're trying to accomplish, I would say.
So I've just focused on what I have available. So So for me, I've done some foliar, I've done some side dress, I've done some soil applied stuff, but I think the writing is on the wall that there's probably going to be some good in furrow and planter applied products down the road. So I think I'm trying to this father-son operation here, so I'm trying to prep the upper generation that's going to be a requirement in the future. But I think there's so many products out there that you can kind of work with what you've got and do the testing, find something that works for you.
Yep.
Yeah, a point that's been made a few times, and it's a good one, is we're under a microscope, be it the EPA, the public. They don't want us polluting the water. They don't want us emitting greenhouse gas. They don't, I mean, sometimes it's unreasonable, right? So I think it's always a win where we can incorporate something that it can't be said that we're polluting or doing something that's unnatural and so forth. So, biologicals fit that bill. Electrophysiology fits that bill, where we don't have waste, we don't have even a physical product to transport every season. So there are a lot of good things coming in that space, and the more we can utilize things of that nature, I think the better off we're going to be and be able to kind of armor ourselves against radical activists that have nothing better to do than do rabble-rouse.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'm from Montana, so if you watch Yellowstone, we have a methodology for
Yeah, somebody need a ride to the train station?
Yeah, I didn't say anything, but no, I'm kidding. But, yeah, and I think the other, a lot of people, companies advocate for multiple foliar, like if you foliar feed go 3 to 4 times, there's typically but it's not a common thing that most people want to do. You want to go one shot, so I think that's another thing to think about as well. If we can go 3, 4, or 5 times, there might be a way better response, but is that something you're going to be willing to do is another. So I think because of the foliar, you're limiting that as it going through the soil, getting to the plant, you're getting it directly into the plant through a foliar, so that's one more, I think, factor that can be considered is, we don't really test for that because we're cognizant of most people don't want to go 3, 4, 5 foliar applications in row crops, so it's but I know like humics and a lot of, or just in general, a lot of the specialty crops, they do a lot of that and they do get a pretty good response because they are fertigating or going through the pivot, or they have systems where they can consistently spoon feed the crop, and there's a very good, incrementally better response that way too. But if you guys, we just need faster sprayers, so you guys, and wider, so you need like a 200-foot, 50-mile-an-hour sprayer, then you guys can probably adopt that method. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. So cool. Any other questions? We gotta cut it off. This guy's thirsty, so. Just kidding. Yeah. So cool. Thanks for joining, everybody. Hopefully that was informative. And if you have any follow-ups, feel free to catch us afterwards. So, yeah.